In this video, we're going to continue to explore our request. We're going to learn how request can automatically parse the JSON for us. We're also going to figure out how we can actually print a forecast using the response data. And finally, we're going to explore some options for the Dark Sky API, allowing us to do things like change the language from something like English to French, and change the units from something like imperial over to SI, so you could get the temperature back in Celsius as opposed to Fahrenheit. Let's get started by having the request module automatically parse the JSON response for us. We can do this by customizing the options object, and there is a list of all available options over in the documentation. So if I head back over to the request module page and scroll down to the table of contents, way near the bottom, we have all available options. If we click this, this is going to list out all of the options we can use. Now up top, we already have the URL option, which we've already used. If we scroll down the list a little ways, we're going to see a JSON option. JSON in lowercase can get set to equal true or false. In our case, we're going to set JSON to true, which is going to have the request module automatically parse JSON responses for us. So over inside of our code, what do we need to do? We're going to add a second property onto this object. So right here, alongside of URL, we'll set up JSON in lowercase. This is important. If you use uppercase, it's not going to work. Then we're going to set it equal to the Boolean true, saying we would like a request to parse this as JSON. Now from here, that means response.body is already going to be an object. There is no need to actually parse it. So let's go ahead and change what we're doing inside of our function. Right here, I am going to use console.log to print the same stuff using our new setup. That would be first up response. Response.body still exists, though since we've set JSON to true, it's no longer a string. It is now the parsed object. From there, we're going to access currently, which is what we were already accessing and dumping. That's what we're seeing down below. This is Andrew with another interruption. As I mentioned in the last lesson, the current weather data for Dark Sky was on currently, but the current weather data for WeatherStack is on current. So if you're using the WeatherStack API, you would want to access response.body.current as shown below. Now we can save app.js, I can rerun the program, and what do we get? We get the exact same response. I have my object showing up with my current information. It's still clear, and the temperature has increased a little bit to 57.55 degrees. So now that request is parsing the JSON for us, we don't have to manually add that code every single time we're trying to make an HTTP request from Node.js. From here, I want to focus on printing a forecast to the user. Now that means we have to figure out what data to include and what to leave off, and that can be tricky to do when you're looking at a dump of your data from the terminal. I find it much easier to use the browser to explore what data I want to include from a JSON response. Now, currently, the information we're seeing is very hard to parse since it is just a JSON string. There are Chrome extensions out there, though, that allow you to see nice parsed formatted data. There are extensions for other browsers as well, like Chrome, Firefox, and Internet Explorer. So what I'm going to do is search Chrome extension, and the one we're going to use is called JSON Formatter, though there are literally dozens of different options out there. Right here, I have the Chrome extension, and all I'm going to do is install it. I'll take a quick moment to add it to Chrome. And once we have it installed successfully, we can go ahead and move back to that page, refresh things, and this time the Chrome extension is going to notice that JSON has been returned, and it's going to parse it for us. Now over here with this particular extension, I can also view the raw data should I want to, but the whole goal is to view the parsed data. Now we can collapse the various properties, easily navigating what we have here. So we have this root object. It starts up here on line 1, and it gets closed way down below at the very end of this object. So way down here on the last line. Everything inside of there is part of that object. Now, this object is accessible to us as body. So when I'm accessing response.body, I am accessing this object. From there, I can grab any of its properties like currently, which is the fourth one listed. That's why response.body.currently works. I could also use response.body.timezone as shown here to get the time zone for the current location. So now we have a slightly better idea as to how we're accessing this information. Below currently, we have minutely, so we can get a minute-by-minute forecast. If I was to collapse that, we have hourly, below that we have daily, and below that we have some flags, and we also have the offset, which are not particularly useful for our purposes. Now, what are we trying to do here? Well, currently, we're just going to use the currently property, though we do have other forecast information we could use to get even more data, which we'll explore a little later. So for now, we're just going to focus on this object, and all of the properties are values we can use. Let's go ahead and talk about exactly what type of forecast we'd like to print. Down below, I have some challenge comments. It's going to be up to you to use the information on currently to print a little message using that actual information. So in general, the goal is to print something like this. It is currently 58.55 degrees out. There is a 0% chance of rain. Now, this piece of information, the current temperature, and this piece of information, the chance of precipitation, they're both available on that currently object. I have a temperature property. This is where I get the temperature from. And I also have properties related to precipitation. Right here, I have precip probability currently at 0. This is Andrew from the future with another quick interruption. So with the WeatherStack API, we have access to a different set of weather data, so let's talk about what's going to need to change, and we'll get started by exploring the root properties we have on our JSON response. So right here, there are 3. We get started with the request property, which contains information about the request that WeatherStack processed. We have the latitude and longitude. We also have the language and the units. We're not going to use any of that data, so let's collapse it. Next up, we have information about the location that we're viewing the weather data for. Right here, I can see this is for North Beach, California. Let's collapse location as well. That leaves the last property, the third one, which is current. Current contains the current weather data, and this is the property that you'll need to work with for the challenge. Now, if we head over to Visual Studio Code, I've made some changes to what you're supposed to do. So this right here should be exactly what you have. I have my WeatherStack URL set up, and I'm accessing response.body.current. All I've done is changed the challenge comments down below. So what you'll end up doing is printing something like the following. It is currently 9 degrees out. It feels like 5 degrees out. So here we are using the temperature and the apparent temperature, the feels like temperature, for when we account for things like wind and humidity. So you can access both the temperature and the feels like temperature on that current property. So right over here, we have current. You can access the temperature on temperature right here, and you can access the apparent temperature on feels like, which we have down below. So for this forecast, I can see the temperature is 10, well, the feels like is 8, so there must be some wind chill factoring into the difference. So this is what you'll end up working with. You'll end up printing something like this using the WeatherStack API. Okay, that is it for the update. Let's jump back into the original lesson. So using these 2 pieces of information, we want to generate the following forecast. That means you're going to comment out this line or remove it and add another console.log call in to print your forecast. From there, you're going to test your work. So you want to run the script and make sure you're seeing your string with the correct values added inside. Take as much time as you need to generate this string using those 2 pieces of dynamic information, and when you're done, come back and click play, and we'll work through it together. How'd that go? Let's get things started by working with our message. So I'm going to use console.log to print something, and that something is the string right here with those 2 dynamic values included. So we start off with some static text. I'll create that in a string. It is currently, followed by a space. Then we're going to concatenate on the actual temperature. So like we did before, that's going to be response dot body dot currently. That's going to bring us to this object right here. And on that object, we have the temperature property, which is the one we're looking for. So dot temperature. Excellent. Now, after the temperature, we go back to some static text. So I'll concatenate on another string, and we will start with a space, the space between the temperature and the D in degrees. Now I'll start typing out degrees, out, period, followed by the start of the next sentence. There is a space, and in here we have to insert the percent chance of rain. So once again, I'm going to concatenate on a value. That'll be response dot body dot currently dot, and right here we are looking for precip probability. So precip, using the shorthand for the word, probability. And finally, we can concatenate on the closing static text. So after our probability, it's percent chance of rain. So right here, a percent chance of rain. Excellent. Now we have this really long string created, and we can go ahead and actually test our work. I'm back with another quick interruption. If you're working with the WeatherStack API, let's go over the console.log call for that. So we start off with it's currently the string followed by the current temperature. Right here, you should have accessed that from response.body.current.temperature. After the current temperature, we move on to more static text. Right here, I have degrees out, which finishes up the first sentence. From there, we start our second sentence with it feels like, and then we get the apparent temperature on response.body.current.feels like. From there, we wrap up the second sentence with degrees out and a period. So this is the solution you should have come up with if you were working with the WeatherStack API. Now we can test our work down below by just rerunning app.js. So I'll use node space app.js, and if I run things, I would expect to get the correct result. Right here, I get it is currently 10 degrees out. It feels like 7 degrees out, which is fantastic. With that change made, let's head back into the regular video. So I'm going to rerun the program from the terminal down below. To start, I'll use clear to clear the current output, then node space app.js to rerun the program, and what do I get? I get it is currently 58.22 degrees out. There is a 0% chance of rain, which is fantastic. We were able to make an HTTP request for data, parse that data into a format that was usable, and actually use it inside of our Node.js application in a meaningful way. For this update, what we'll end up doing is figuring out how we can change the units for the data that comes back. So right now, we're seeing the temperature in Celsius, but if we want to, we could request that temperature from WeatherStack in Kelvin or Fahrenheit. Now, in the original lesson, what we did is we explored the Dark Sky API to figure out how to get that done. Then we changed our URL and we watched the data change in the response. We'll end up doing that exact same thing for WeatherStack. So first up, let's check out the documentation so we can figure out how to get this done. I'll switch over to the browser. I'll switch over to the quick start guide we explored earlier. Then I'll scroll to the top, and right here, we can head over to WeatherStack's documentation. So I'll head over to the documentation page, and right here, we can learn all the different ways we can work with the WeatherStack API. Now, what we're looking for can be found in the left-hand sidebar. So down below, we have Getting Started, we have API Features, and we have Options. Under Options, we are looking for the units parameter. So for our particular URL, you'll remember that we set up our API key, and we also set up our query. What we'll do here is set up something else. We will set up units. So I'll click on Units Parameter. That will bring me down to the documentation. And right here, I can see that I can set units equal to one of the following values. If I set units equal to M, I'll see my data using the metric system. Now, this is the default option, so we're already seeing our temperature in Celsius. If I switch the value over to S for scientific, I would see my temperature in Kelvin. And finally, if I switched units over to F for Fahrenheit, I could view the temperature in Fahrenheit. So right here, let's explore how we can get that done. And since I live in the States, I'll be switching things over to Fahrenheit. So I'll head back over to Visual Studio Code, and what we'll end up doing is adding another query parameter. So right here, I have my first one, access key. If I scroll over, I have my second one, query. We'll add a third one. So right at the end, I'll use an ampersand. Then we can set up another key value pair. So right here, I'll go ahead and use the key of units followed by the value. So units equals, right here, I'll use F. Once again, you can use M to see the temperature in Celsius, S to see it in Kelvin, or F to see it in Fahrenheit. So with units set up, let's save app.js. Down below, all I'm going to do is rerun the program. So I'll run app.js through Node once again, and if I do, right here, I can see my data looks pretty different. Right here, I am seeing my temperatures in Fahrenheit. It's currently 45 degrees, and it feels like 41. So now we know how we can customize the units that are coming back from our API. Now, at this point in the original lesson, we had added just one additional piece of information to our weather forecast, and that was it for the lesson. So we added that additional piece of information as the very first thing we render. So to explore what we'll end up adding, let's head back over to our API request in the browser. So I'll switch back over to the browser. I'll head over to our API response, and right here, what we'll end up doing is starting things off with a general description of the weather. Now, we could collapse the request property. We could also collapse the location property. Right here, that just leaves us with current. And what we'll end up doing is printing the weather description. So right here, that would be overcast, and that will show up first. Now, it won't always be overcast. Sometimes it'll be sunny or partly cloudy. Whatever it is, that's what we'd like to show up. So we could access that data on current. Then from there, we would access it on the weather descriptions array. What we'll do is pull in the first weather description and render that as part of our forecast. We can get that done by heading over to app.js and adding that as the very first thing in console.log. So right here, that would be response.body. From here, we will pull something off of the current property. Right here, as we just explored, that was .weather underscore descriptions. Now remember, that is an array of strings. So I'll use bracket notation to grab the first item by its index. That would be an index of 0. Next up, right after that, what I'll do is use the plus operator to concatenate the rest of my string onto the end. Now in this case, if we used the current data, what we would see right here is the word overcast followed directly by it. There wouldn't even be a space in between. What I'll end up doing is starting this string off with a period and a space, so this data looks like it's in its own sentence. Now that we have that in place, we can save things and test our work. Now in the original video, we added something similar, though it came from a different property. So when you do watch the original video, you'll see something different right here, but this is what we need for the WeatherStack API. So down below, let's just rerun our program once again, and if I do, right here, we can see exactly what we had before. Now it looks like in the last couple of minutes, the weather did indeed change. So right here, I see partly cloudy, followed by it is currently 45 degrees out. It feels like 41 degrees out. So this is awesome. We now have a summary of the weather, then we have the actual temperature, followed by the apparent temperature when we factor in humidity and wind. So in the original video, that's where we had stopped for this one. What we'll end up doing is moving on to the next lesson, where it will be up to you to work with a completely different API. Now, the good news is that when it comes to these big updates because of the API change, we're basically done. There's a couple of small updates throughout the next several lessons, but there's actually nothing that needs to change in the next one. It was really just the last one and this one that required some more substantial changes. Now that we have that code in place, though, we are good to go. So let's jump right into the next one, which is a challenge for you to fetch data from a new API.